So a couple years ago, I was meeting with a director and her 4 direct reports. These were all managers of others, but they reported to her. And we were having this retreat. And at one point, I turned to the 4 her direct reports, and I said to them, "Hey, so how comfortable do you feel going to your boss here? You know, this person right here in the room. How comfortable do you feel going to her when you've made a mistake, or when you have some feedback for her, or when you disagree with her, that sort of thing? How comfortable do you feel going to her?" And there was at least a 15-second pause. These 4 people just stared at me, almost deer in the headlights like. And finally, their boss jumps in and says, "Oh, they feel totally comfortable coming to me."
Awkward.
This sounds like a stupid question.
Probably is, because, yeah, go ahead. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for.
When you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth.
In the first microseconds, your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and what we call social danger.
I mean, I'm pissed off at you.
Me, specifically?
Well, just because you're my boss and all.
Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Go forward and don't suck. Hey, this is Mike Nash.
And this is Ethan Nash here.
And this is the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast,
where we help managers not suck, or at least suck a little bit less.
That's right.
Today, we are going to be talking about the power differential. And we alluded to this last episode a bit. Let's go back to that story we started the episode out with, that very convenient story with the manager speaking for her employees.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Yeah, well, right after that, I asked the managers that report up to her, I asked her, "Hey, so what's going on here? And why weren't you feeling comfortable saying anything at that moment?" And their answer was, "Well, it's our boss. She's sitting right here in the room, you know."
Of course.
And that makes sense. And what's really interesting in that situation, those 4 managers actually have a really decent relationship with that boss. They like her. They get along well. But still, the power differential was in play right there in that room.
And I think the idea here is that a lot of people and a lot of managers don't understand the power differential and what that even is, and the type of power they have over their employees and what that even means.
Yeah, it's not so much the power itself that's in question. I just think that most managers aren't aware that the power differential is felt by the person who has less power in that relationship, and it always is. And this is the part that I think you're right. Managers aren't usually aware of this. It's easy to think, well, I'm a nice manager, I'm a good person, we have a good relationship, so therefore they're not feeling any awkwardness about having an adult in their life who has power over them. But in reality, there's always an awkwardness with that. There always is.
It is kind of unnatural to be an adult and have another adult in your life that has power over you.
Absolutely. You know what, dude? We spend, or many people spend more than half their waking hours with or near or in relationship to this other person who has power over them. And that, like you said, it is weird. It's kind of unnatural because most people, whether it's conscious or not, don't feel comfortable, with other people having power over them. We don't like it in our religions. We don't like it in our relationships. We don't like it in our politics. But here's this person who has power over me that I'm having to associate with quite often, pretty much, again, more than half our my waking hours. And so here's the thing. I get a new boss. I get promoted. I get hired. There's this part of me that's consciously or unconsciously checking to make sure, because I'm in relationship now with this person who has power, I'm checking to make sure that they have my best interest at heart. Because if they don't, like if I ascertain that they don't have my best interest at heart and they have power over me, that's frightening.
Absolutely. And again, I like to look at things through an evolutionary lens. That's just kind of the way my brain works. I mean, if you are in a tribe and someone has power over you and they don't have your best interests at heart, you're screwed, buddy.
Yep.
You're kind of screwed there. So it's only natural. So as an employee, and I think we've all been in this position before of kind of filling out, right? Testing the water. Is this person okay? Are they out here to get me? Are they out here to help me? What's going on here? So let's get into this a little bit. Let's kind of define the power differential a little bit further. What exactly is the type of power that this authority has over you, and what can they do with it or not do with it?
Well, here's the thing. So the power that we're talking about, I think the best way to approach this, the power differential is made up of three ingredients, we should say. So there's three different ingredients to the power differential. So let's just walk through those. First thing, which is what you're referring to now, Ethan, it's power, right? One of the three ingredients of the power differential is this person actually has power or control over me in many ways. And I think we should explore into this a little bit. Let me ask you, Ethan, in what areas would a manager have authority or power over you?
For one, they more or less set your working schedule.
Yeah, let's talk about time, right? Yeah. Here's a person who, again, more than half my waking hours tells me when I have to be there, what time I have to show up. Do I get to take this time off that I want to take off to go to Disneyland, right? I mean, that's power. That's control.
As well as, like I mentioned before, they have the ability to give you a raise, to promote you. Your financial situation is more or less in their hands.
Absolutely. And that's when you think about what we're talking there, we're talking about livelihood. I mean, we're talking about the ability to fire me, to give me a raise, to give me a promotion, right? This goes to livelihood. And I've actually had some managers in class who've spoken up here and said, well, that's just not the case for me. I'm a manager. I'm not a director. I don't have the power to fire even one of my own employees. I don't have the power to promote. Well, you may not. You may not actually be able to pull that lever. But I'll tell you what, you do have power over and control over is that employee's reputation, right? And so you absolutely are going to sound in on whether or not this person deserves a raise. You're certainly going to be involved in whether or not this person loses their job. So you may not be the one that, pushes the buttons, but you certainly impact the people who do push the buttons.
You're a big influencer there.
Absolutely.
And I've discussed this concept with people before, and I've gotten pushback of, you know what? No, the employee, that's up to them. That's their initiative, right? If they show up and they work hard, that's on them. It's not on the manager. But the reality is, if a manager chooses for whatever reason not to like someone and they don't have their best interest in heart, that employee can work as hard as they want, and that person still might not get a promotion or get a raise.
Yeah, it's really in the hands of their leaders, of their managers, right? That's power, right? Other areas of power, tasks, right? I mean, here again, this huge chunk of my life, there's this other adult telling me what to do. This evaluation, that's actually a big one. Think about how weird that is. In what other part of your life does another adult get to walk up to you and officially judge you?
Right. Besides, having a parent
or a marriage partner or a partner. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's weird. Here's another adult who gets to tell me, unless I'm in school and have a teacher, right? There's not another part of my life where I'm getting graded, right? And evaluated in that way. That's power.
Okay, so that's about power.
Right.
There's three ingredients here. Yeah. Let's talk about the second one, which is...
okay, so where the first one is the power you actually have over an employee, right? Which is significant. The second ingredient is, we call it transference. The second ingredient is, it's all the stuff that this employee brings to the table that has nothing to do with you at all. I mean, this is their own story about authority. This is the way they view authority. And you, as their boss, did not create this. In fact, you inherited this. They showed up. They already have their own ideas about, is authority trustworthy? Is authority scary? Is authority weak? Is authority out to get me? Whatever that is, whatever that unconscious story they have, they came to the table, to the workplace, right, with that already in their, in their psyche, and that came from lots of places, right? Where did you, Ethan? How did you come up with your story about authority? Where did that come from?
Well, it came from a lot of places. I mean, for one, it's going to come from how I was raised by my parents.
Yeah, right. And in your case, you have it really good, right? In your case, you have perfect parents.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
That was the power differential right there, wasn't it?
Yeah,
You just agreed with me because now I'm your boss too.
Yeah, that's a prime example of how not to use the power differential.
The way I used it, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
Right. That's exactly right.
But yeah, your parents and how they raised you, how they disciplined you, how they rewarded you, I'd imagine that is going to play a factor into how you view authority, as well as teachers.
Let's go with parents. That's not just a factor. That's like 80% of it, if not more. I mean, that's huge when you think about the relationship you had with your parents growing up, everything you just mentioned, plus more, right? Your story of authority is like baked into you from day one. And then you're right. What did you just say? Teachers?
Teachers, early bosses,
coaches.
You're right.
Religious leaders, all these people in your life who principals, right? That have exercised any kind of authority, all that added up has kind of woven this fabric of what is authority for you. And you don't even really know that's what happened, right? You're not necessarily aware that your story of authority is really a story, right? So I hire you, let's say, you're now in relationship with me as your boss. You put all that on me. It's the lens that you're looking through as you're relating to me.
Sure, absolutely. And you may want to come back to this and feel free to. You said that this has nothing to do with you. This is all based on their past experience. But it could also be true that, say this is my job right out of college. I haven't had a boss before. And my first couple months of actually having a boss was with you.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, that's my experience with authority.
With bosses.
Authority. Right.
Yeah. It's interesting though that first boss though it's funny because a lot of times you can see in the employee, the young employee, right, the 21-year-old, the 18-year-old, you can see their transference almost louder at that age. Like they're bringing right there to the table their story of authority that came mostly from their parents, of course.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And I just had this thought, and maybe it doesn't relate to this bucket, but I would also imagine, take us back to Psychology 101 in college. I would imagine there are also certain personality traits that might be more receptive to authority than other. I mean, if you look at the big 5 personality traits, which is, you can debate that all day long if you'd like, the big 5 personality traits, but openness, those are, our creatives, our painters, whatever, they tend to veer away from the status quo. They might be more challenging to authority as compared to someone high in the trait of conscientiousness, which is, those are our police officers or what have you, right? They value order more and may be more receptive to authority over them.
Authority structures, right? Right. Yeah, that's very true. And in fact, there's a lot of personality stuff that plays into this one. And we'll spend some time in these podcasts in the future talking about some of these various personalities.
Right. The idea is nature, nurture there with nurture playing a large role in this.
Absolutely.
In this case. So let's move on to the third the third ingredient of the power differential, which is?
Let's do these again. We've got the power that I have, number one. We have transference, which is my past story of authority. And the third ingredient is the only one that the manager really can control, right? It's their behaviors. And that's really where our training kind of jumps into. Let's figure out, what does it look like for a manager to behave in such a way that, okay, here's a negative, right? I'm exaggerating the power differential. That's one option. I'm doing certain things to make the power differential much too big, which is creating distance and fear and unapproachability, right? We have other managers who err the other way with their behaviors, and they err toward, let's eliminate the power differential, right? Let's pretend there's no power differential. We're just buddies. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, right? Okay. What we're shooting for is a set of behaviors that we call mitigation. How do you still utilize your power differential when you need to use it, because it is important, without overdoing it, right? How do you mitigate the effects of the power differential so that you become safe, you become approachable, you're able to build relationship?
Gotcha. And I think it is going to be important to distinguish and understand what happens if you go too far in one direction. What happens if you're too buddy-buddy and you work to eliminate the power differential completely? Mm-hmm. And what happens if you just use it and exaggerate it as much as you can?
Yep, I think we need to talk about both of those. First, though, I think that we need a little more power differential in our relationship. I've decided.
Oh, really? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, how's this going to work?
Well, I want to read to our listeners out there a little text conversation that you and I had about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, we did not talk about this before the start of this show.
We did not, but I think it's important that people recognize what I'm up against here.
Uh-oh, my hands are starting to sweat a little bit.
All right, so here we go.
So
this is a text from 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Right in the middle of the conversation, and Ethan says to me in a text, "Hey, I may need to take the morning off tomorrow because of all the snow in the pass right now. I need to go and shred." And I guess that's what is shred your generation's lingo for snowboarding?
Everybody knows shred. I got to go shred some pow pow.
Shred some pow pow. Okay, well in any event, Ethan
I got to carve the mountain.
So Ethan says in his text that he wants to take the time off tomorrow to go shred, and then he says in a second text, "I mean ... I'm feeling sick ... And then I text him back and say, "Please submit a request to HR and copy me on it." And then Ethan texts me back, "Please submit a kiss to my ass and copy me on it."
Yeah, okay. Well,
I think we need a little more power differential here, buddy.
I think that's the perfect amount of power differential right there. That works well. Well, that's a prime example. So interesting. Okay. I'm glad you just read that out loud to everybody.
You're welcome.
Where do we go from here?
Well, let's talk about some behavior. How much time do we have left? Where are we at?
We got about another 20 minutes or so.
All right, good. I think what we could do here, and you know what, I'm going to jump ahead to something we say almost, that we say at the end of our podcast. I'm going to throw it in here. I really want to encourage everybody to participate in this podcast by sending us emails, and I'm thinking about that right now because we would love to hear, other than the normal, right? We want to hear your questions. We want to hear topics. We want to, be able to troubleshoot with you. But also, we'd love to hear your stories about the power differential in the workplace. I would love to hear stories of managers who have just really stepped in it as far as exaggerated the power differential in some maybe funny or cringeworthy ways, but I'd love to also hear about some managers that you've had that really knew how to rock this thing, right? Really knew how to mitigate that power differential to create safety.
Yeah. So if you have questions, quick plug here, send me an email. That's going to be Ethan@nashconsulting.com, ETHAN@nashconsulting.com. We want to hear from you. And actually, I can, if I don't take us too far off track here, I'll tell a story right now about how I think the power differential was used, and you tell me if you think this is appropriate or not. One of my first jobs out of college, I did have a manager who, in our team meetings, in our group meetings, they would jokingly, and it was clear that he wasn't being stern and serious about it, but people would ask a question along the lines of, well, why should I do it this way? Why should I do it that way? And his answer would often be, because I'm the boss. and smile, right? Smile, and everybody kind of chuckled, right. Probably because he's the boss, and so we're going to laugh at his stupid jokes. But
right.
But that seems like a situation where he's clearly joking, but yet I could feel the discomfort in the room.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, that's a really good example of one of the behaviors that we talk about avoiding so that we can mitigate the power differential. Announcing your actual power differential, except for maybe a few really rare exceptions. In general, reminding people that you're the boss is not only unnecessary, it does exaggerate the power differential.
Even when you're joking. I mean, again, it's clear it's a joke.
Yeah. Let's say, though, we had where that might be fine, right? You've got such a good trust relationship with the person. You're one-on-one. You're joking. You and I do it, right? Because I'm your boss, Ethan, right? I think there's a place for it when the trust and respect is super high. But if you're talking to a whole group of people, I would be suspicious about that trust and respect being that high for every single one of those people in the room.
Right. And I was one of those people in the room that was fresh out of college
Right.
and was trying to make an impression. And in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, that's true. He is the boss. I guess I should just do it.
And you thought
Right.
you laughed just because
And
you
I
better laugh.
laughed because there's the power differential there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Here's another story. I've got a buddy named Jerry, and he's got a boss, and she needs some work. Here's what happens often. There would be a job that'll come up on their shared server. Any of the five of them should look at that and go take that job and go take care of the problem. One came up, I guess, a week ago, and several hours went by, and nobody grabbed it. So she called a meeting, and I guess she does this. She called a meeting, and she gathered them together, and she said, to each of them, one-on-one, one at a time, explain why you did not take that job. And so they all made up some excuse. The next day, she called them all together and she said, all right, I got a job. I need a volunteer. I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but will somebody volunteer? So my buddy Jerry goes, yeah, I'll do it. And then she goes one-on-one to each of the other four people and said, why did you not volunteer? Explain why you did not volunteer. I guess she does this about once every other week, this sort of...
It's a bit of a game.
It's a game. It's a little bit of a witch hunt. I don't know what it is, but I'll tell you what, when she calls a meeting, my buddy says they're all afraid. They all get butterflies in their stomach when it's time to go have a meeting. So here's a woman who is the boss. She's got authority. Obviously, let's go back through the ingredients of the power differential, right? She has power, authority, right? Number two, whatever transference those guys bring to the table, that's not her business. That's not her doing, right? But the third ingredient is behaviors. And here's a manager who's acting in a way that is almost, you would think, designed to increase the power differential.
Right. So I don't know if we exactly made it clear of why we need to decrease the power differential. Like what are going to be the effects of that? Is that going to allow for, I guess what I'm trying to say, is that going to decrease morale? Or, why do you need to not have power?
Well, yeah, again, let me rephrase that for you. We don't need to not have power. We still need to have the power differential. When you actually have authority, you're going to have to use it. But if you don't work to mitigate it, right? If it's too big,
right,
what's going to happen? That's a really good question, right? What are the results? You're unapproachable. Now, if you're unapproachable, if you're my boss and it's hard for me to approach you, like I'm a little bit afraid of giving you feedback, you're not going to find out some things. You're not going to find out some important growth opportunities that you have. I might not report to you a mistake I've made,
right,
which could come back and bite us both in the ass.
Lack of transparency.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm gonna hold my cards close to the chest.
Totally.
I'm going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to answer in ways that keeps me safe, which means I'm going to laugh at your jokes, which is fine, but I'm also probably going to maybe, here's one that comes up quite frequently. When you say to me, hey, I need this by next Tuesday, I'm going to say yes, and I may end up not following up and not following through because I couldn't get to it. I knew that at the beginning, but I didn't say that.
Yeah.
Or I might give up something else that I really shouldn't be giving up. I might let something else slip because I had to say yes to you because I felt like I had no options.
Right.
Right. I mean, the list goes on. The impact of there being an exaggerated power differential, on top of all those things, it leads to generally a decrease in trust and respect between us, which, as you said, Ethan, absolutely works its way into a morale problem. And as we said in our first episode, right, you get low morale, you get all sorts of nasty stuff.
Well, yeah, and I've been in this situation where it's not with you, just so you know.
Yeah, okay.
Not yet.
Okay.
But I'm operating from a place of fear, and we keep coming back to fear, and we'll probably come back there a lot throughout this podcast. But when I'm in a situation where I know you have authority over me, I know you can fire me, I know you can reprimand me, you can discipline me. There's all these things that you have.
I can say no to your requests.
You can say no to my requests. You can take away my vacation time, whatever it may be. And then you're kind of throwing it in my face every day over and over again. I'm operating from a place of fear, and things just don't get done as well in as creative of a way. I mean, it leads to all sorts of issues.
People that are operating out of fear are not bringing their best self. They're bringing their defended self, right?
Right.
Their sympathetic nervous system has kicked in. They're not as empathetic. They're not as creative. They're watching out. They're being careful. They really aren't able to really invest and engage and be creative.
So I think it's safe to say that mitigating the power differential without eliminating it allows people to bring their best selves to the workplace.
Absolutely.
Now, if you go too far in the other direction and you completely eliminate it, I mean, what type of effects is that going to have in the workplace?
Yeah, and let's circle back to that in just a second, if you don't mind. Let's talk about the behaviors that exaggerate the power differential, right? We've already talked about announcing your power differential, right? I'm the boss, right? Here's a really important one. Using anger in your voice, right?
Okay.
When I sound mad, when I sound frustrated, and I have power over you, that makes you, whether you're aware of it or not, that, what would you call the amygdala overload thing?
The amygdala takeover.
The amygdala takeover, right? I've put you in a place of fear because the person who has power over me is now mad at me. So I go into fear mode, which means I go into fight or flight.
Exactly.
Right? Fight or flight is exactly, as you've said already, it's a result of evolution. It's how we survived. Our fearless ancestors got eaten by tigers. Right,
exactly. And I'll pause on that one for a second because that was actually a big one for me when in one of my first management jobs, I actually didn't recognize that I would sound a little bit angry, a little bit frustrated with those I was managing. And I wasn't getting the best out of them until they gave me that feedback. Hey, you sound a little frustrated, a little bit angry. Yep. And I knew that, and I changed that, and a lot of cool things happening. So I do want to point out that if you're not recognizing that in yourself, don't beat yourself up about that.
Yep.
Ask for feedback. Anyways, let's move on.
Yeah, a few more of those behaviors that create an exaggerated power differential. Micromanaging, right? Taking too much control. Interrupting people. I mean, that seems like a small thing, and we'll talk more about that on another podcast because we're going to talk about what it means to really listen so the other person feels heard. But when the person with power talks over me, that's an exaggeration of the power differential right there.
Right. Here's another one. Just always sharing your opinion first. Hey guys, what do you think we should do? You know what I think we should do?
Right.
I think we should go this direction. It's like, oh, okay.
So I guess that's what we're doing.
I guess that's what we're doing, right?
Yep. How about defensiveness, right? I try to give you feedback, you get defensive. You look put out that I just tried to give you feedback.
Right.
That's the power differential. That's being exaggerated right there. Shaming. Why did you do that? What's wrong with you? Don't you care about this company? That kind of garbage.
Right.
There's lots of stuff.
Telling people what they're supposed to think or feel. Did you mention that one?
I didn't.
Just, hey guys, don't you think we should do it this way? Isn't this the best way to do it? Raise your hand if you think that's the best way to do it.
Right.
It's like, well, I'm not going to say no at that point.
Yep. How about those apparently emails? Apparently, you didn't get my email, right? It's, again, a little condescending. Yeah, lots of stuff. Not being available, not getting back to people. When you really dig into it, there's a lot of ways that we can take this existing power differential and exaggerate it and not even know we did it, right? So what else? What's next?
Well, I want to bring it back to that question I asked before. We talked about what happens if you go too far in the direction of exaggerating your power differential. I think we painted a pretty clear picture there, but I don't think it is as obvious of what happens when you eliminate it. And I, at least in my experience, I don't know if this is everybody's experience. I've had more managers throughout my time that tried to more or less eliminate it rather than exaggerate it. And I want to know what has been or what is the negative outcomes of that? Because it doesn't seem all negative to me for someone to be at that level, kind of a friend level with you.
Yeah, this is really fine lines, though, isn't it? Right? There's fine lines between all of these. But the manager who's gonna eliminate the power differential is the manager who is probably uncomfortable with their authority, who probably wants to be liked more than they want to be effective, right? Who's going to have trouble, for example, calling you out on anything. They're going to have a really hard time giving you feedback if that feedback is corrective, because that would mean that you might not like them, or you might, they don't want to hurt your feelings. It's the manager who doesn't want to be directive, doesn't want to make a decision. I run into this in my work a lot. The manager who feels that everything has to be consensus and has a really hard time ever making a decision. That's going to be a person who's struggling with their power differential. They just want to be friends. And let's talk at a later date about friendship versus, is it okay to be friends with your employees? Preview, yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely okay.
Yeah.
However,
and it's even a good thing in some.
Oh yeah, in some cases it's good. But and I'm talking about not just liking each other, but can I have a friend who I go out with, right? And they also work with me. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, when I'm at work, one of the ways that I eliminate the power differential is by elevating the need to be liked and to be friends above everything else. And so because we're friends, I'm not going to call you out on something, or I'm not going to disagree with you.
Right.
Now, here's one that's a little bit uglier, right? It's the manager who eliminates the power differential by just not rising to the occasion of a management and being inappropriate, right? Let's badmouth the bosses together.
Right.
Let's talk about inappropriate things by the water cooler.
Let's talk poorly about the company together. I feel your pain. Yeah. I don't know what decisions are making up in the C-suite.
Yeah, those are idiots upstairs, and that makes you feel like you're joining with the person, but it really does bring a negative tone to the workplace. And here's the thing. Whether you're exaggerating the power differential or whether you're trying to eliminate it, either one of those mistakes, people will respect you less.
Right. Do you find people or new managers, right? They're a new manager, they're newly supervising people. Do you find that they struggle with one end of the power differential than the other? Like a new manager is going to be more likely to not show any power at all because they're kind of just getting comfortable with it, or what have you observed?
I'm kind of two minds on this, buddy. I think that partly it's personality based. It's your behavior style. So there's people whose tendency is to exercise power, and so they may err that way because they're probably, as a new manager, they're insecure.
Right. And we'll talk about the behavioral styles on other episodes.
We really will. Yeah, but if that's my behavior style, right? I enjoy using my power, or I fall back on that when I'm insecure. And here I am in a new management role. I don't feel secure, so I'm going to act bossier, louder, more directive than necessary. And then there's the other personality who goes the other way, right? They're uncomfortable, so they go the other way. Well, I want to be liked. I want you guys to feel good about me. So I make the mistake of eliminating. But here's the last point on that. If you rose through the ranks, like you were peers with these people, and now you're their boss, in that case, I believe what I'm seeing is more of a tendency to eliminate the power differential.
I agree, and I've been there and I've seen it. That's so true. A couple more questions to you. We have a few more minutes here. Is it possible to have a power differential with someone who isn't your manager, right? There's a power differential between you and someone that isn't your manager. Say a more senior person, like say you technically have the same job, you're new, they've been there for 10 years. I feel like there could be a power differential there as well.
Yeah, and believe it or not, dude, that you're getting into a sticky area because this leads to a whole nother set of conversations. Like, for example, right? Well, okay, the answer is yes. I mean, it's not the same thing, right? If there's not organizational authority, if there's not actual org chart authority, it's not going to be as pronounced, right? That's where the real power differential comes, is in the actual, you have actual power over me. But there are other versions of the power differential that includes power based on knowledge, power based on longevity, and some of the stickier areas. There's issues with race. There's issues with gender. There's actually other forms of the power differential and it's really interesting and important conversations to have, and we're just not going to be able to have it today.
Right. It's a very complicated, very nuanced conversation. I'm sure we can get into that at a later time. So again, we talked about two ends of the power differential that you're not trying to go to: the exasperated side and the mitigated side, or two. I'm getting a look from you right now. I totally just butchered that word salad.
Exaggerated is what you meant.
What did I say?
You said you said exacerbated, right? Exacerbated. You meant exaggerated. The word exacerbate weirds me out, so let's not go there. So go ahead.
It does sound weird. Anyways, back on track here. We talked about going to one end where it's exaggerated, and the other end where it is completely mitigated.
No, eliminated.
Eliminated. What are some behaviors that could mitigate the power differential, right? Someone's too far to the right side of that continuum.
Yep. This is really important. We want to make sure that managers are safe, right? We want to make sure as a manager that you are approachable, you're safe, and this comes from your behaviors. So let's just list some. I'll start off with just being relatively calm. And what I mean by that is emotionally consistent. You know what? Have you ever had that manager that you almost have to take their temperature to figure out which manager I'm getting today, right? Are they going to be mad today? Are they going to be shaming today, right?
Just a regular Monday morning for me.
Yeah, shut up. Yeah, I think it's about emotional consistency, meaning I can sort of, one of the things we want as humans, and this again goes back to sort of our evolutionary history, we want predictability, especially in somebody who has power over us, right? That's scary if I have to wonder, is she in a bad mood today? Is he going to be upset today?
Which mic am I getting today?
Which mic? Hey, we don't have to make me the example here, dude.
No names.
Here's another one. Be relational, right? Like smile, check in, build relationship. On one of our podcasts, we're going to talk a lot about how to build relationships through these regular scheduled one-on-one conversations, right? Well, that's super important, that we are not aloof, that we are building a relationship, that we're building trust and respect. Praising people, showing appreciation, pointing out where they've done well, noticing the good.
Right. I got one.
Yep.
How about just practice humility? That's a big one, and it can be tough.
Yeah.
It is tough at times. I mean, this is anything from saying, hey, I'm sorry. Hey, I messed up here. Hey, I was wrong. There's a lot of ways to show humility.
Yeah, I ask managers in class sometimes, I say, let's just give me some phrases that demonstrate humility. And they say those exact phrases. I'm sorry, I was wrong. You know better than I do. What should we do here? These are all phrases that demonstrate humility. And you know what? You don't have to be actually the most humble person in the world to be able to practice humility.
Right.
It's a behavior.
There are going to be limits to your authenticity when you're a manager.
For sure.
And it doesn't mean don't be yourself and come in as a completely different person. It means figure out where you fall on that power differential continuum and adjust your behavior slightly, more for some people than others, but to fall in that sweet spot in the continuum. Do you have another?
A couple more behaviors?
Yeah, a couple more behaviors.
Ask for feedback.
Ask for
how am I doing as a manager? What would you like to see more of or less of from me? Ask for opinions. Hey, I need to make this decision. What do you think? Give me your thoughts.
Right.
And
in that case, actually consider their opinions as well. It's not just a formality. I've seen that before.
Yeah, don't pretend you're listening and then just round file everything they just said. Like, listen to their opinions, factor those in, consider that to be data. Delegate, empower people.
Absolutely. There's a lot of them. We're running low on time here.
All righty.
So we're going to wrap it up here. I want to read what I felt was a great quote that kind of explained the power differential, or the outcome of having a good read on your power differential and mitigating it to the appropriate level. A great manager improves lives while improving performance. A poor manager makes workers' lives miserable while destroying performance. And when I think of the power differential, I think of somebody that hit that sweet spot, that they're improving lives by making someone feel more comfortable, more welcomed in that workplace and appreciated, while also improving the performance of the workplace.
Right.
And I think that's a big positive outcome of the power differential when it is mitigated to the right level.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Here's the thing: as I work on mitigating this power differential, and of course not eliminating it,
exactly,
that leads to some problems. Again, I keep coming back to this phrase. It's going to increase the trust and respect.
Right. So let's wrap this up.
All right.
But I do have one final question for you, and take your time with it because it is a bit of a deep question here. But okay, power differential, we get it. Don't go too far in one direction or the other. It needs to be there without it being completely eliminated, without it being totally exaggerated. But how do you know where you're at? I mean, in my first management job, I don't think I had a clue where I was at from the start. Like, I didn't know if I was totally on one side or the other. So how do you assess that? How do you know how you are being perceived?
Yeah, that's really simple. You just go to your employees and say, hey, I'm a good manager, aren't I?
And that always works.
Yep.
Yep.
No, that's hard. That's a hard question, right? The problem, of course, is if I've exaggerated the power differential, then I've created this exaggerated power differential, and people are going to be less likely to be honest with me when I ask for feedback. They're going to, maybe tell me what they think I want to hear. So it really is tricky. So this all comes down to a couple things, right? These behaviors that mitigate the power differential that we've been talking about, right? Staying calm, being relational, checking in with people. Listening really well. We didn't talk about that one. Listening really well when somebody's talking to you, like not interrupting them, really tuning into what they're saying, sharing information freely, practicing humility, asking for their opinions.
A whole bunch of them.
I would make a list maybe of those and start with some self-assessment, right? Am I building a relationship? Am I meeting with my people one-on-one? Am I checking in? Am I praising people? Am I pointing out good things they've done and thanking them for that? Am I asking for feedback? I would just make a list and do some self-assessment to start with, right? Because you can't necessarily get the truth by just straight out asking, hey, how am I doing, right? So make a list of these behaviors that will mitigate the power differential, and then measure your own management behaviors by that list. Over this last couple weeks, am I doing these things? Or when was the last time I can remember? Here's a good one, right? When was the last time you can remember asking your employees, what would you like to see more of or less of from me as a manager, right? I mean, if you can't remember the last time you've asked that question, then you might be at risk of not having, asked for feedback. So I guess I'd start with making a list of all the behaviors you can think of that will mitigate the power differential, measuring your behavior by that. And I guess I'd jump into, go ahead and ask for some feedback, right? You might want to tell your employees, hey, I really want to improve my management skills.
This is a great place to show that humility piece.
It absolutely is, right? I know I'm not a perfect manager. I'd like to be better. I'm going to be asking you guys next time I meet with you each one-on-one to give me some feedback about what would you like to see me do more of or less of? Ask that question. Give people some chance to process it, and then listen. When you do go sit down with them, the worst thing you can do is ask that question and then argue with them, right? Or push back or say, I don't do that. Or, be humble, ask questions, ask for their insights, show that you want to grow. Here's another one. Apologize for those times that you have crossed the line. Yeah, so you've been defensive and you know it. You apologize. You've talked way too much at a staff meeting. You asked for opinions, but then criticized their answers. When you can catch yourself doing that stuff, go back in. Hey, guys, I apologize. I know I sounded defensive yesterday. Can I have a do-over? It's that humility that you mentioned a couple times, Ethan. That's a real key right there to mitigating this problem, if it is a problem. Let me just close by saying this is a really tricky subject. We're not going to always be aware of how we're showing up. That's absolutely true. And then, I might need to discipline someone, right? I might need to call them on their behaviors. I might need to overrule something. And so I'm using my power differential appropriately. Then I'm going to second guess myself, right? Am I exaggerating it, or am I using it appropriate? There's really not a black and white right answer for this one. I think my hope is that people are just going to be aware that they put this on their radar, that the power differential is a thing.
And, it's not going to happen overnight. If you're too far in one direction or the other on the power differential, it is going to take some work to hit that sweet point, to be right there in the middle where the magic happens. If I could make one suggestion here, one of my favorite quotes is, if everything is your priority, then nothing is. So one thing that's really helped me with this was to, make a list of all the behaviors that will help get me into that sweet spot with the power differential. And don't try to work on all of them at once. I like taking 2 or 3 for that week, and I put that up on my computer screen. And just for that week, I am only focusing on those 2. And so I'm really narrowing in my focus. And I said, you know what? This week, I am just going to work on listening more and not gossiping at the water cooler with my employees.
Great idea.
So anyways, take a couple, really focus in on them for a week. The next week, take 2 more and really focus in. And that is how you're going to see some actual growth and development in getting to that sweet point in the power differential continuum. Anyways, folks, that's all we have for today on the power differential. We're going to close this episode just by mentioning, please email me, Ethan at nashconsulting.com. That's ETHAN at nashconsulting.com. Let us know your questions, and we would be happy to answer them for you. Your management questions, whether you're a manager or you're looking to be a manager, whatever. Email us. We want to hear from you. All right. That's all we got for you today, folks. Until next time. Bye.